My name's Campbell, and welcome to devlog number 5.
Freezer!
Devlog number 3. This time, we'll be looking at the most complicated system in Before the Deep.
I'm in danger!
Combat. Opportunistic pirates, rogue whalers, or extremely vexed Imperials. Sooner or later, you're bound to find yourself embroiled in a less than cordial disagreement. And in the world of Before the Deep, such disputes are resolved in the most gentlemanly fashion imaginable.
By hurling super heavy, high velocity shells at one another until there's no one left to argue.
Combat makes up half the gameplay experience in Before the Deep, blending the maneuverability of an aircraft,
If that aircraft weighed several thousand tons.
combined with the firepower of a large-scale naval ship. Our combat doesn't rely on a simple health bar for your entire ship. Instead, every room on board your ship is fully simulated, each with its own purpose, armour and crew. Victory can be achieved in two ways: by incapacitating the enemy crew, or destroying the ship's lift systems, sending it plummeting into the swirling toxic void below. This creates a unique dynamic where a ship's health is defined not only by the number of crew on board, but also the maximum altitude your ship can fly to, determined by its design, weight, and system efficiency. Every ship has a peak altitude it can maintain, and this depends on a variety of design factors. The weight of your ship, the power and efficiency of your ship's lifting cells and boilers, and the size of your crew all contribute to its operational ceiling. For example, a well-designed ship capable of sustaining altitudes at only 20% of its lift power will be much tougher to bring down than a ship that requires 80% of its lift power. This means that adding extra mass in the form of more armour might make your ship better at shrugging off enemy fire,
And with enough armour, you can become completely proof to lower caliber weapons.
but the added weight will demand more on your ship's core systems, effectively reducing your ship's health. This adds a layer of strategy from the moment you refit your ship, as you have to be careful to balance defense, offense, fuel efficiency, and mobility. As with all things in Before the Deep, the combat strives to be as realistic as possible while still being fun. Each shell is designed to mimic its real-world behaviour, from its flight path to its impact upon striking a target. When a shell hits a target, 4 main properties determine how much armour it can punch through: its speed, weight, diameter, and hardness.
Phrasing?
Some of these effects are pretty intuitive. A heavier shell can punch through more armour. A faster shell can punch through substantially more armour. Firing a shell made of styrofoam isn't going to do anything. But a lot of the effects are less obvious. A faster shell might have a higher penetration,
Phrasing?
but if it doesn't have sufficient mass, it'll quickly lose that velocity, making it useless at longer ranges. Think about firing a ping pong ball at someone really quickly versus lobbing a brick at someone.
Rick Frog! Thank you!
A smaller diameter shell focuses more energy into a smaller area, creating more pressure on impact, but with less overall kinetic energy, like a needle. It'll get through, but it isn't going to do a lot of damage. The inverse is also true. Large diameter shells punch through less armour, but just straight up punch you. Kinetic damage is directly proportional to the energy it imparts into the target on contact. So larger shells lose penetration,
Phrasing?
but can dish out more damage. And it's not only the shells that are dynamic. Effective armour thickness also changes dependent on the angle at which the shell hits. If it hits straight on, it has to pass through the actual thickness of the armour, but if it hits at an angle, the effective armour it has to punch through increases. This means that angling your armour increases the amount of protection you have. If the shell hits at a high angle and can't punch through, it'll bounce, negating any damage and sending the offending shell violently ricocheting off in another direction. Maybe saving you, maybe slapping you straight in somewhere sensitive. However, this is a double-edged sword. If you don't have enough power to penetrate,
Phrasing? Shut up!
it has the ability to completely ignore this and just tear straight through, ripping apart the target. And then there's the complicated bit. Physics loves unforeseen consequences.
Prepare for unforeseen consequences.
Like everything in the game, shells follow a relatively accurate aerodynamic flight path. If you ignore air resistance, calculating the azimuth and elevation to hit a target is relatively trivial. A shell will fly along a perfectly defined parabola, which makes it possible to calculate an exact firing solution. For those of you who've forgotten all maths you learned back in school,
And let's be real, that's probably most of us.
this means that it can be condensed into a single equation with a single answer. However, this makes shooting quite static and dull. Each gun and shell combo ends up feeling extremely similar and behaves in the same way at all ranges, which is boring and doesn't drain the sanity of developers. And speaking of insanity, once you introduce aerodynamics to the equation, finding an exact firing solution becomes literally impossible. It has no defined solution, and you end up with nonsense like this.
The position where it is now the position that it wasn't, and it follows that the position that it was is now the position that it isn't.
This is a problem straight from reality, and its inclusion adds a huge amount of authenticity to the combat. Calculating a best guess firing solution was an extremely important part of naval gunnery, as getting the first accurate shot off could be the difference between life and death, and as such, fire control systems became vitally important to who wins and who's dead. Our fire control systems rely on two different algorithms. The first is the most obvious, and what the player will also naturally try. Guess the first shot, see where it goes, and then adjust based on observation. This means that as the AI fires at you, if both you and the AI hold the same course, it'll get increasingly good at hitting you. This algorithm is decently straightforward. You can see a visual representation of how it works here. As the shell group passes the target, it calculates how wrong it was, and uses that info to make a next best guess to hit the target. For balance reasons, we've obviously nerfed this system, so it isn't quite as good and acts more like a human, and doesn't take over the world. But this system still relies on an initial terrible guess. In the footage playing in the background, it starts by firing directly at the target.
And misses terribly.
We can improve this by ignoring air resistance and using a parabolic solution. And this works well at short ranges,
Dodge this.
but at longer ranges, when air resistance makes a big difference, it doesn't work at all. And so, we did the completely sane thing and built a military-grade fire control system.
I wrote a musical.
Why did you do that?
Just to write a musical. What? Does there have to be a reason? I don't think so.
Yeah, there does.
Our goal with this was to simulate how an actual early 20th century warship control systems work. When aiming, you feed the fire control system 3 pieces of information: the azimuth, elevation, and range of where you want to shoot. Azimuth and elevation are input simply by looking at the target, as you would in most games. Where it gets unique is the range finding. The range is determined using a stereoscopic rangefinder. If you've used an old camera,
Or a battleship.
you'll be familiar with this system. This works by essentially having a set of binoculars, with each lens placed some known distance apart, with the light then being recombined into a single image. Each lens can be rotated, resulting in 2 slightly offset images. When the images overlap, the distance between the lenses and the measured angles is then used to calculate the distance to the target. And then, behind the scenes, the fire control system simulates a series of shots until it finds a solution that hits. The efficiency of this depends on how quick the system is at simulating these shots, and how good it is at guessing the next best shot. Both of which it's gotten extremely good at, to the point where it can perform hundreds of these simulations in a millisecond, fast enough for each fire control system to update in real time. Combining both of these has resulted in the fire system that you'll use in game, and we're extremely happy with it. We've also not seen this in any other game, so we're really curious to see why the reason for that is. But we think it's fun.
The ropes creaking, ships leaking, sails are on fire.
Not all shells are created equal. Each has a unique behaviour that will affect how it performs. Armour piercing is the simplest type of shell. It's literally just a heavy lump of metal with a ballistic cap that you lob at the enemy, destroying critical systems and shredding crew with the high-speed debris it generates on impact. Armour-piercing shells have the highest penetrative ability,
So we're just done with phrasing, right? That's not a thing anymore?
and do the highest amount of kinetic damage, but will perform poorly if the shell overmatches the armour of the target. Armour-piercing high explosive is similar to regular armour-piercing, only it carries a nasty surprise in the form of an explosive warhead.
Surprise!
APHE is extremely good at mincing crew with explosive damage, and deals a decent amount of kinetic damage. However, the shells have less penetration when compared with armour-piercing, and their explosive fuses can only arm if they hit enough armour to activate. Flak shells are our version of high explosive. Each shell contains a timer set to activate once the round gets close enough to the target ship. This then triggers a high explosive within the shell, which fills the surrounding area with hot shrapnel. Shrapnel struggles to break through even medium amounts of armour, but can be devastating against unarmoured targets. Additionally, as an area effect weapon which deals damage independent of the shell's velocity, flak's best suited for engaging targets at a distance. Grape shot, which is basically just a massive shotgun shell, works like a very heavy flak shell that activates immediately on firing, and can be used to tear through crew and systems alike. Grape shot has significantly more penetrative ability than conventional flak, but suffers from a pitiful range. You need to be in the ship equivalent of melee range, meaning it tends to be more effective on faster ships.
Yeah!
Before the Deep also has a selection of weapons, all of which are some variant of a high-velocity, long-range shell applicator. Guns are categorized by size and type. A turret can only accept guns within its size class, but can accept any variety of weapons. Long guns are the ship's equivalent of a sniper rifle. They have a high muzzle velocity, giving them extremely favourable firing characteristics, although their smaller calibers tend to mean that the round loses velocity over time. However, they remain extremely accurate at all ranges with very flat firing arcs. Long guns can fire armour-piercing, and are the only guns capable of firing high explosive rounds, for totally valid and not arbitrary reasons. Howitzers are the workhorse guns of Before the Deep. capable of performing most tasks but masters of none. They're capable of firing almost all types of shells at decent muzzle velocities but with poor accuracy. This makes them excellent flat guns, capable of engaging targets effectively at great ranges, but suffer at mid-ranges compared with long guns. Because of this, a main battery of long guns, supported by a secondary battery of smaller howitzers, tends to be quite a good combo. Carronades are the naval equivalent of a mortar. They have a very large caliber, but a pathetic muzzle velocity. This makes them nearly useless at doing any kinetic damage, but the large sizes of their shells make them extremely good at throwing flak at people. They're also the only gun capable of firing grape shot, but can't fire any armor-piercing rounds. They're good at short ranges, but also perform surprisingly well at mid-ranges. Rockets take the place of torpedoes in Before the Deep. A rocket battery is an extremely dangerous weapon.
How did this happen? We're smarter than this.
Apparently not.
Allowing even a small ship to deal an incredible amount of damage. Even something as small as a frigate can briefly dish out the firepower of a heavy cruiser. However, rocket technology is still in its infancy, and thus it's very inaccurate. They've also got crazy reload times. And that's it for this massive devlog. This quickly got way out of hand. This is by far the longest one we've done so far.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
So we're curious to see what you think about the longer content. In channel news, we're still obviously a tiny channel, but we've grown a lot over the last couple of months. Thanks so much to those of you who subscribed since the last devlog. There's really quite a lot of you. We're even getting close to 100 subscribers, which is absolutely amazing. In celebration of this upcoming milestone, we're thinking of releasing a stripped-down demo version of the skirmish mode for free, so you can actually get your hands on the game and let us know what you think. Thanks to all of those of you who've already subscribed or left comments, it really does mean the world to us, and we're really happy to have you along for the journey with us. Your comments particularly mean a lot to us. We're a completely independent studio, because ultimately the only people we want to be beholden to is you, the players, so getting to hear from you is always great. In channel admin news, we've got 2 more devlogs in the pipeline. A shorter, more theatric one, which is going to go into how you make a physics engine for a game. And another massive devlog like this one, which is going to go into the campaign aspects of the game, which is honestly nuts. The campaign is like a whole new game on top of the game, and I'm really happy with it, so I'm curious to see what you think about it. We're also thinking of starting an additional series with more standard gaming content. It'll be the dev team and friends of the channel playing games, and we'll try and focusing it on games which have inspired us and Before the Deep. You can actually see an early version of this on FlippedBovines channel here.
Go, run. We'll do that.
We're good.
No, we're not good! Not good! It's alright, I survived.
We'll probably try some test videos on this channel and see how they do. They're a lot of fun to make, and it means you get more content quicker, so hopefully it's a win-win for all involved. Finally, as an aside, you might have seen some lag spikes in part of the footage in this video. And believe it or not, that's a good thing for you. Some of these lag spikes are our fault, resulting from something called overdraw, which is caused by multiple transparent particles overlapping. Currently this is mainly an issue with firing large caliber guns and just requires a little bit of tweaking. It's just slightly complicated because all the guns use a single dynamic shader for their muzzle flashes, so it requires a lot of testing to make sure it works.
But it's easier than doing 30 individual shaders.
Anything else, however, is because I'm developing this on an old computer. How old? It's outlived 5 prime ministers old.
Okay, that's not really saying a lot.
But it might as well be steam-powered, which I suppose is thematically relevant. It's become a running joke now that my computer's the AK-47 of PCs. And this is great news for you. This is genuinely our performance benchmark. If I can develop and run the game on this machine, you can definitely play it on your machine. Thanks very much for listening if you still are, and we look forward to hearing from you in the comments. This is a problem straight from reality, and its inclusion adds a huge amount of Orson Welles. Can we add Orson Welles? Is he still around? But their large shell size. You got some shell size. The azimuth rhymes with vermouth. Why is it so hard to say shell size?
Of course, you merely adopted the range-finding system.
What fresh hell is this? Armor-piercing shells have the highest penetrative ability and do the most amount of kinetic damage, but will perform